Emily was sitting by the window, the soft drizzle tapping against the glass, when a sudden knock at her door jolted her from her thoughts, her heart skipping a beat, because she never expected anyone at this hour, especially not him, Mark, her best friend's husband, standing there with a hesitant expression that made her stomach twist in confusion and curiosity, and before she could even greet him, he spoke. His voice low and urgent. "I need to talk to you, Emily, it's about Sarah." And the mention of her friend's name made a shiver run down her spine because she knew anything involving Sarah was serious, intense, and could change everything. Yet she stepped aside, letting him in, noticing how tense he looked, how his usual confident demeanor was replaced by a nervous energy that made her pulse race. And as they sat in the living room, the scent of rain and wet earth mixing with the faint aroma of Emily's tea, he hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck, clearly struggling with what he had to say, and she tried to read his eyes, searching for a hint, a clue, anything, but all she saw was conflict and something else she couldn't quite name, a vulnerability she had never seen in him before. And then he finally spoke, revealing that he had discovered something about Sarah, something troubling, something that left him questioning everything about their marriage, and as he described the situation, Emily felt a wave of sympathy for him, a sudden pull of closeness that made her heart ache because she knew what it felt like to love someone and feel helpless, and she found herself leaning forward, listening intently, offering small reassurances even though her mind was spinning, thinking of Sarah, thinking of herself, thinking of the complicated emotions that were starting to swirl between them, and as he finished there was a long pause, filled with the sound of rain and their breathing, and Emily realized that this conversation was different, heavier, charged with an intensity that was impossible to ignore. And just when she thought she understood what he had come for, he hesitated again, looked at her with an expression that made her stomach flip, and whispered almost too quietly to hear, "Emily, I need your help and I don't know who else to turn to." And in that moment, Emily's world tilted, the boundaries of friendship, loyalty and desire blurring, leaving her heart pounding, her mind racing with questions, and a curiosity she couldn't resist, because she knew this night, this knock on her door, was the beginning of something she hadn't anticipated, something emotional, dramatic and deeply personal, and as they sat together, the rain continuing its steady rhythm, she realized she was about to step into a story far more complicated than she could have imagined, a story of secrets, longing and choices that would test her in ways she had never faced before, leaving her on the edge of fear, excitement and a strange, undeniable attraction that made her pulse quicken and her thoughts scatter. And just as Mark took a deep breath to explain further, the sound of a car approaching outside made them both look up, heart skipping again because it was unclear who it was, and Emily realized that whatever she was about to hear next could change everything, not just for her, but for Sarah, for Mark, and for a connection that was quietly growing in the tension-filled room, leaving her with a sense of anticipation, a soft hook of suspense that promised that this night was only the beginning, that the revelations to come would test loyalties, awaken emotions, and unravel the comfortable life she had thought she knew, leaving her entirely unprepared for the storm that was about to enter through her front door. Mark's voice trembled slightly as he began to explain, the room heavy with unspoken tension, Emily listening closely, her heart hammering as he revealed that Sarah had been hiding a part of her life from him, a secret that had grown slowly, quietly, until it now threatened to tear the trust and love between them apart. And as he described the situation, Emily felt a mixture of sympathy, concern, and a strange pull toward him, noticing the subtle lines of worry on his face, the way his fingers fidgeted nervously with the edge of the sofa cushion, the rare vulnerability in his usually confident eyes that made her want to reach out, to offer comfort, yet knowing she had to remain careful, aware of the boundaries of friendship, yet unable to deny the magnetic tension building between them. And Mark continued, explaining late nights of unanswered questions, the growing distance he felt from Sarah, the moments where he had tried to bridge the gap but had been met with silence or excuses, and Emily could almost feel his heartbreak as though it were her own, her chest tightening with empathy, and somewhere in that empathy, there was a dangerous spark, a gentle adult attraction that she had never felt before, something tender, emotional and quietly stirring, that made her cheeks warm, and her pulse quicken. And as the rain pattered against the windows, the soft dim light casting long shadows in the room, they both paused, their eyes meeting, a quiet understanding passing between them that this conversation was no longer just about Sarah, it was about feelings, trust, desire, and the human heart in all its complexity. And Mark, taking a deep breath, leaned closer, his voice dropping into a whisper. Emily, I don't want to lose her, but I feel so alone and I need someone who understands, someone I can talk to without judgment. And Emily, sensing the raw honesty, the emotional exposure in his words, felt an unexpected connection, a pull that was both thrilling and terrifying, because she had never seen this side of him, never experienced this kind of intimacy that went beyond friendship, and yet she knew she had to tread carefully, balancing empathy with boundaries, knowing the moral line was thin, the stakes high, and the emotions swirling between them dangerous, but compelling. And as he shared memories of moments with Sarah that had been painful, private, and heart-wrenching, Emily found herself sharing small, quiet reassurances, soft words of encouragement, a gentle touch on his hand that lingered just a second too long, both aware of the tension it created, aware of the attraction, yet unwilling to break the fragile trust forming in that moment. And as the evening stretched on, their conversation weaving between grief, longing, and unspoken desires, Emily realized that this meeting was not a random occurrence, that Mark had come to her for more than just advice, more than just empathy. It was a test of honesty, of connection, a moment where boundaries could shift, hearts could be exposed, and choices could define what came next. And just when they both seemed caught in the fragile intimacy, a sudden message buzzed on Emily's phone, startling them both, the light from the screen illuminating their faces, Mark's expression tightening as he read, and Emily, curious but hesitant, saw that it was from Sarah, asking him to meet her unexpectedly, throwing everything into uncertainty, tension skyrocketing, because now the conversation that had felt private, safe, and intense was suddenly threatened by reality, by the looming presence of Sarah. And Mark's eyes met Emily's with a silent plea, a question unspoken, a vulnerability that made her chest ache with a mixture of desire, worry, and responsibility. And as he stood, pacing the room, conflicted and torn, Emily realized that the emotional storm she had stepped into was growing stronger. The lines between right and wrong, loyalty and longing, trust and temptation, blurring with every heartbeat. And just as Mark reached for the doorknob, hesitated, and turned back to her with a look that made her knees weak, whispering, I don't know what to do, Emily. I need you to help me figure out what's right. She felt a rush of emotions so intense that it was almost overwhelming. The rain outside now a perfect mirror to the storm inside, leaving her with a cliffhanger of uncertainty, anticipation, and a quiet, simmering attraction that promised that whatever happened next would change everything, not just for them, but for Sarah, for their friendship, and for the delicate emotional tension that had begun to weave a complicated, irresistible bond between them. Emily watched Mark's conflicted expression as he hesitated by the door, the rain outside now falling harder, mirroring the storm of emotions inside the room, her heart pounding, knowing that whatever happened next could change everything. And Mark finally spoke, his voice raw and honest. Emily, I have to face her, but I don't know if I can do it alone. And she felt a surge of compassion and a quiet, intense connection that made her chest tighten, her thoughts racing as she realized that this moment was about more than Sarah, more than friendship. It was about trust, vulnerability, and the fragile human heart. And she reached out, placing a steady hand on his arm, feeling the warmth and tension, the subtle shiver that passed between them, the unspoken emotions hanging thick in the air. And she whispered softly but firmly, You don't have to be alone, Mark, I'll help you, we'll figure it out together. And as she said it, he looked at her, eyes wide with gratitude, relief, and something deeper, something neither of them wanted to name aloud yet, because the air was heavy with longing, attraction, and the undeniable intimacy that had grown between them. And together, they went over what he should say to Sarah, carefully choosing words, discussing feelings, emotions, and truths that had been buried, and Emily felt herself getting pulled into the orbit of his heartbreak and honesty, their conversation weaving between hope, fear, and a delicate emotional tension, each word, each glance, each gentle touch building a connection that was intense yet unspoken. And as they strategized, Mark confessed small, personal details, memories of Sarah that were painful but also filled with love. And Emily listened, offering comfort, empathy, and a quiet strength that made him lean closer, their knees almost touching under the dim light of the living room. And in that closeness, a new awareness formed, a subtle spark of attraction that was both thrilling and terrifying. And when Mark finally decided to leave, Emily walked him to the door, both feeling the weight of what had been shared, the intimacy of the evening, and the pull of emotions neither could ignore. And just as he stepped out into the rain, he paused, turning to her, eyes searching, voice almost breaking as he said, "Emily, thank you for being here. I don't know what I'd do without you." And she smiled softly, heart aching, feeling the depth of his gratitude and something more, something quietly stirring between them. And as he walked to his car, she realized the emotional bond they had formed was undeniable, complicated, and profound, and it would linger, shape decisions, and perhaps even change the course of their lives. And when Emily closed the door, she leaned against it, eyes closed, the rain soaking the world outside, her mind replaying every word, every glance, every touch, the intensity of feelings growing, and a soft, bittersweet longing settled in her chest, because she knew that what had begun this evening, this connection, this trust, this emotional intimacy, was not something that could be easily ignored, and yet she also knew she had to navigate it carefully, honor boundaries, and respect the lives and hearts involved. And in the quiet of her living room, Emily allowed herself to feel the ache of desire, the pull of attraction, the complexity of love and loyalty all at once. And as the night deepened, she realized that life had a way of bringing people together in unexpected ways, testing hearts, challenging emotions, and creating bonds that were beautiful, complicated, and unforgettable. And she knew, with a mixture of excitement and fear, that tomorrow would bring challenges, revelations, and perhaps decisions that none of them were ready for, leaving the story suspended in anticipation, charged with emotion, longing, and the delicate tension of a connection that had grown in secrecy, honesty, and a gentle, mature passion, promising that their lives and hearts would never be quite the same again.